Okay, thank you for inviting me here today, and thank you for staying to hear me. As John has said, my name is John Bassett. I'm a fellow for cybersecurity at RUSI, the Whitehall think tank. Before that, I worked for GCHQ for a number of years on the operations side. Anything I say is a personal view and doesn't necessarily represent the view of my previous employer. Been asked to speak on the future of cybersecurity, and that's a very wide-ranging remit. I'm conscious that there are people here who have levels of technical knowledge far greater than mine. And although I have a master's in information technology, I'm at heart still a Roman historian, which is my first degree. So what can I actually bring to this discussion? What I hope I brought to my time in the civil service is the ability to pull together people from different disciplines. The technologists, and the mathematicians, and the linguists, and the analysts, and the liaison people, and many, many others, to work in one team. And that, I think, is the thing that I most want to see in cybersecurity across the next 2, 3, 4 years. If I have a high concept, one point from this talk, it's this: that up to this point, we've seen cybersecurity's had two main pillars. A policy and operational pillar, people in Whitehall and elsewhere, in industry, and an academic pillar founded on computer science. And both of those elements are absolutely critical. But my view is that we're missing two more pillars, two more legs to my cyber table. Of course it has to be. This is a technological discipline. You've got to have computer science at the center. You've got to have the real-world operational and policy elements. You've also got, in my view, to bring in far more than we've been able to so far, human behavioral science and psychology on the one hand, and social science on the other hand. We have now, and we've seen presentations on this already today, some pretty advanced technological solutions to advanced technological threats. One of the things that's a real challenge is we don't get the people element of that yet. We have instinctive, intuitive sense of what that might be, how they might behave, and some anecdotal evidence there. We don't yet have a really rigorous psychological understanding of how people behave on the internet. And we have a sense that they take more risks. But we don't know exactly how, we don't know what the demographics are of who. We've got to work that one through. And understanding the social sciences dimension to this. There's an international relations element, that's certainly there. And there's a criminology element that's developing there. There's other things also on the economic side, bringing in economy and economics into this and merging it into our thinking on this thing. That sense of having a holistic approach, a multidisciplinary holistic approach, I think it's developing now. Here and there, people are very much thinking in these terms. It needs to become accelerated. It needs to be accelerated. It needs to become widespread. We need, the next time the British government issues a cybersecurity strategy, it should be based on all four pillars: the human behavioral, the social science, the computer science, and the ops and policy element. John's highlighted some important points that Lord West was making this morning, so I might perhaps just dwell on one of those, on my previous experience, actually. And that's at the board level, what happens when you get strategic surprise? And I had some involvement after 9/11 in government operations at that time, for some years. And one of the unfortunate consequences of being good at security and intelligence is that it makes you a lot more vulnerable to strategic surprise. If you're a country, if you're Ruritania, and you're not very good at intelligence and security, actually things will happen all the time, and you won't have any awareness of them, and you'll say, well, there we go, something else has happened over there. If, on the other hand, you have really good intelligence and really good security, a bit like the UK had in 2000, a bit like US had in 2000. When you get hit by something, and it is when, there's a real chance it will knock you off course. Not knock you off course in ways you can understand, but the psychology, the psychological impact of strategic surprise when you don't think you're vulnerable. That can push you into all kinds of places. It can confuse you. You can get people in denial. This is the sort of thing I think you'll see at board level when you have an unexpected, nasty surprise. You'll get people going into denial. You'll get recrimination. You'll get people trying to fit what's happened into their preconceived understanding of what might happen. You'll get people, as we got after 9/11, you'll get people in the then US government who will tie this thing into their preconceived idea of what Iraq was going to do and create, in my view, a completely false connectivity, which lives with us still. So you're going to see that, and it's one of the problems. If you're good at security, you're going to have horrible strategic surprise. It's one of the real challenges, and you need, if you're on boards, you need boards to be able to look at that and handle that with maturity. It's terribly, terribly difficult. Correspondingly, another risk with cybersecurity, I think, is because we still don't quite understand all the people dimensions in our communications to people as a whole, populace as a whole, there's a risk that we put the emphasis on the wrong things. And that by taking a perhaps slightly ill-informed view of the risk to the public, however well-intentioned we may be, we also run the risk of discrediting our message. If we talk about a particular threat that doesn't actually apply to a lot of people, that kills our message. It weakens our message very significantly. We've got to target our message very effectively and very specifically in terms of cybersecurity. I was at a meeting of BCS a month ago. There was a lot of good thinking going into that. Still, it's underdeveloped. Still, in terms of the messaging we're wanting from the strategy, how we communicate that to the populace at large, still underdeveloped. Still less thought on that than we would want. One example, I guess, of how human behavioral science combining with computer science may be able to make a difference is in the context of preemptive intelligence and social media by the use of sentiment analysis. Sentiment analysis is a technique that's been widely used in advertising in a number of contexts and is applied now to social media. You look for key hit words about your product. I think some of us are looking at the possibilities of trying to get preemptive intelligence, threat intelligence out of social media by using psychologically well-developed hit phrases and hit words alongside a well-developed sense of language, vernacular language in that. It's coming up with some interesting results at this stage. It's a long way to go, and it may not be valid. But there is the possibility that you can use sentiment analysis with hard psychological indicators on social media to get some kind of indicator and warning of developing trends, developing threats. May not be very good, it may not give you more than a few hours, 24 hours notice, but perhaps sometimes that might be worth having. So that's, I think, an interesting area where the combination of computer science and human behavioral science may possibly have some real operational intelligence benefits. The final point I'd make on the point, again, linking back to boards and so on, is that one of accountability. That seems to me still a really quite significant issue. In government, it was always an issue for us, accountability and oversight, tremendously important. But one of the real challenges in government was, and I think still is, that some of the oversight authorities, parliamentary oversight authorities and so on, are themselves not always, and I think it's getting better, but they're not always absolutely switched on to the nuances of the internet era and the rapidly changing technology there is there. One of the hard things about oversight and accountability is you have to have owners who are not necessarily technologists, but who understand a little bit of techno-speak. Not a huge amount, but enough to get by. This is, in some ways, to be a successful business leader at this time, you either need to be a great translator, or you need to have access to a great translator. People who can pull together the different disciplines. I see I now have an orange card. I think I'd end up with just, again, that high concept. Computer science, yes. Operations and policy, yes. Human behavioral science, need that. And social science, need that. Got to have a holistic approach which pulls on all those different elements. And that, I think, I will say, is my piece.